Thank you so much, Dr. Chnoy. It's indeed a privilege to be speaking to you all today. And I thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and all the organizers for putting on such an intellectually rich conference. It is a pleasure to be on a panel with Drs. Cynthia Enloe and Laura Sjoberg. In the late 1980s, it was Dr. Enloe who got us started on this journey, bringing feminist perspectives to international politics, when she asked a seemingly simple question, where are the women? And Laura Sjoberg was my first PhD student doing research from a feminist perspective. Both of these remarkable scholars have continued to challenge us to think differently about international politics. In this talk, I will focus on the academic discipline of international relations, or IR as it is called, by giving a brief introduction to the development of feminist IR. I will conclude by assessing its impact on international politics. Dr. Enloe's question, where are the women, turned out not to be so simple after all. It wasn't until the mid-1980s, well into my IR career, that I began to notice that there were few women in the field and almost no texts by women scholars that I could assign to my students. International politics was a man's world. There were few women heads of state, ministers of foreign affairs or defense, or military leaders. While this is no longer the case, with some states even declaring a feminist foreign policy, international politics is still predominantly a man's world. Trying to understand and explain why this is the case is what motivated me and other feminists to do the kind of work we do. Feminist perspectives on IR got started in the late 1980s in the context of a larger shift in the discipline. During the Cold War, US IR was heavily invested in strategic thinking and great power rivalry, thought best to be explained by realist theory. Realism became the dominant paradigms in other parts of the world too. After the Cold War, however, the discipline opened up to a series of which feminism was one. I will begin by defining gender because I think it is key to understanding both how feminists explain the persistent inequalities between women and men, and also how states behave in the international system. Feminists define gender as an analytical tool, a set of variable but socially and culturally constructed characteristics. Those such as power, autonomy, rationality, and the capacity for leadership are stereotypically associated with masculinity. Sorry, I'm just having a little problem here with my technical issues. Okay, their opposites, weakness, relationality, and emotion, as well as caregiving, are associated with femininity. There is evidence to suggest that both women and men assign more positive value to masculine characteristics. To be successful in the public sphere, women frequently try to emulate men. It is important to stress that gender is not just about women or even about individuals. It is also about structural inequalities that govern our lives. Since gender is a social construction, it is not amenable to causal theory, which is why most feminists prefer critical or constructivist theories. IR feminists frequently begin their research at the micro level, attempting to understand how individuals embedded in social relations related to gender, race, class, and geographical location both impact and are impacted by international politics. They have also investigated gendered states, analyzing the extent to which states and their leaders aspire to the masculine characteristics described in order to achieve success in an anarchical international system. Developing such research programs involves extending the boundaries of the discipline, asking different questions, and listening to unfamiliar voices. Unlike conventional IR, which strives for objectivity, feminists are explicit about the political commitments in their scholarship. With roots in social movements, feminism's normative goal is to understand and transform unequal power relations between women and men. So what are the kinds of questions that feminists are asking? Deciding which questions are important is based on prior assumptions about how we define global politics. It is significant because it defines what counts as issues worth researching and theorizing about. It is often the case that the questions that IR feminists ask are considered irrelevant for explaining, well, real-world issues, or are judged as interesting but outside IR's disciplinary boundaries. And here I return to Dr. Enlow's question, where are the women? A question not typically asked by the IR discipline. Feminists have looked for women not only in the halls of state power, but also in social movements, in migration flows, in peace negotiations, and in terrorist organizations. Locating women in these diverse places involves placing them within gendered structures. Typically, feminist research questions are investigating how the international political system and the global economy contribute to the subordination of women. For example, women work longer hours, many of which are spent in unremunerated reproductive and caring tasks that are not counted when we measure productivity. To investigate such issues, feminists are rethinking the meaning of security beyond its focus on national security, which has been predominant in international relations. So how has feminist theory impacted the discipline? The volume and variety of feminist research is impressive. Many more women are present in the academy and at professional conferences. Students who have taken my courses have told me that it changes the way they think about the world. However, in the US, and I suspect and know that in other places as well, there is still enormous resistance to including feminist courses in core curricula. In certain respects, I think that the international policy world has been more receptive than the academy. Certain states, such as Sweden, Australia, Canada, and others, are making women's issues central to their foreign policy. In theory, at least, the commitment to gender mainstreaming is widespread, and gender issues are high on the international agendas. But that, sorry, I'm having some more problems. That being said, there are still huge gaps in implementation and in understanding the meaning of gender. And if we were to significantly mitigate gender inequality, It would require deep structural changes that would be very threatening to existing power structures. Let me conclude with some observations about our current challenges. Could it be that COVID-19 is changing the way we think about leadership? Many of the states, South Korea, New Zealand, Iceland, and some of the Scandinavian countries that have performed well in fighting the pandemic are led by women. Caregiving, typically associated with women, has become a valuable tool for state leadership. Could it be that the pandemic has caused us to imagine a new kind of global leadership, where care is as important as military strength, and a world where men's and women's skills are equally valued in the conduct of international politics? Thank you.